Good morning. Special edition of Soul and Beyond. Very excited, as you know, to have Penny with me from Kentucky, USA, to speak to you all this morning and share her incredible near-death experience. For those of you who are new, I'm Gwenda, the host of Soul and Beyond, a mystic, a medium, always been a communicator with the divine, with angels, and lots of things in the unseen world. And as a former nurse myself, Penny, of course, resonates with my heart tremendously, and I'm overjoyed. Good morning, Kelly. You're nice and quick off the mark this morning. I'm delighted to have Penny join me this morning and welcome her to Soul and Beyond. Hi, Penny.
Hi, how are you? It's
Very
morning there for
well.
you. It's late here for us.
It is Thursday morning. So as my viewers know, I was waiting for us to start yesterday morning, forgetting that it is a flip around. So it was
Oh, you were
only,
thinking Tuesday. You thought you were a day behind.
oh, I just didn't realize that, that we go into the next day while you're on Wednesday. So
That's
it's
okay.
great. And so Penny is a mother of 3 grown kids and a grandmother of 4, and she and her husband enjoy life in the bluegrass state. I love that name of Kentucky.
Mhm.
Penny will have to tell us why it's called the bluegrass state. Penny went into being a cardiothoracic ICU nurse, and I believe during a lot of her nursing career had maybe some experiences that she relates to of the same as my experiences when it came to um, people moving out of their body, different people in coma states. And Penny spent a lot of time in her nursing career in critical care. And critical care is where the soul does a lot of moving around in and out of the body. The same as when a baby is in vitro, the soul actually moves in and out. So when mothers say they're concerned because they haven't felt baby move, it's usually because baby's not home. Baby's home elsewhere in the galaxy and or the universe, whichever word you use. But Penny had an incredible experience, and I'm delighted to hand it over to her to share with you her amazing life-changing experience. So, Penny, it's all up to you.
Well, thank you for having me. And as Gwenda said, I'm a nurse. I retired after I got sick, and so I've just been doing education since then. But yeah, I had been working as a nurse in a step-down unit, and we had a patient who had become aggressive and hit me, and I fell down, and he kept hitting me, and I ruptured C4, 5, 5, 6 in my neck. Had to have surgery to fix that, and the surgery resulted in nerve damage that resulted in the end of my nursing career. And so I was home recovering from that surgery, and they had used some bone glue in my neck or cadaver bone. I can't remember which it was, and we suspect that that's what triggered these anaphylactic reactions I began to have. And I was in the kitchen with my daughter. It was an August day, hot. I made us both strawberry smoothies, and we were going out to the porch to have these. And my daughter went out ahead of me, and I had mine, and I had taken a couple of sips of it, and I started feeling just odd. Like we call it, well, but not right there. So I started feeling odd, and my mouth was kind of itchy. And I thought, well, that's weird. What would I've had these a million times. What would be the problem? And it progressed really rapidly. I started having more saliva and having to keep swallowing. And it was getting hard to swallow. And my chest was itchy, and I could see I was breaking out in hives. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is going quick. I think this will be anaphylaxis. And I had an EpiPen because I was allergic to shellfish, had never had to use them.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm just standing there debating it. I don't know why, but I just debated it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to. It's like it would make it real. And
Yes.
I just, I then I got that impending sense of doom. And as a nurse, that's like your trigger that patient's going to die and you have to attend to them. And so
Yeah.
I went ahead and gave it. And my son drove me to the hospital, and I got there, and it was a little small town hospital, and I had worked there for a while, helping them get their ICU beds up. They needed to add beds. And the nurse that was working in the ER I knew, and she was a nurse, that if you were dying, you probably wanted a different nurse. And I don't say that to be mean or anything, but we all know there's different levels. And
definitely.
by the time I got there, I was having refractory anaphylaxis. So I took the epinephrine and was fine for 15 minutes, and then it started back. And that's rare. There's not a lot of people that have that. And so I was looking up because I couldn't breathe with my head down. And I was wheezing really loud at that point, and I said, anaphylaxis. And I laid the EpiPen package. There's a 2-pack, and you could see one was gone. And I laid it on the counter. And she said, well, did you take that? And I nodded. And she said, then why did you come to the ER?
Oh, she's helpful.
Right? And I'm like, because that's what you do when you take your EpiPen. And so she said, we've got a room. It's clean. We don't have a bed. And I can't put you in there without a bed. And I said, I don't need a bed. I need help. And so she put me in a wheelchair, and we have this hallway that goes down past the nurse's station to a restroom, in like a staff restroom, and the physician's sleeping quarters. So there's nothing on the other end of that hall but those things. So there's no traffic. And she put me down there by myself. I'd worked that ER. I've worked codes in that ER, and I've never seen anyone do that. It was the strangest thing. And I started getting worse and worse. And I thought, okay, they're going to have a fit if I take this EpiPen, but I don't think I can get enough breath to yell for help. And there's no way I can walk out of there, out there outside this wheelchair.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and did it. And I was okay for about 15 minutes. And then it started up again. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is bad. And at that point, I developed stridor. And stridor is where the airway closes so hard or so narrow that there's a whistling, a loud, high-pitched whistling sound that comes out. And a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, I can't remember, we have both that staff our ERs, she heard the noise, and she looked down the hall, and she says, oh my gosh, and comes running down the hall, pushes me into the room, which has a bed. And I get in there, they get me up on the bed, and my veins are already collapsing because my blood pressure's dropping. And I'm a bad stick anyway. And they just kept trying to get an IV in. They gave me a shot of Benadryl, a shot of epinephrine, a shot of steroids.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And I just, things started not like they started seeming kind of far away. Yeah. And the nurse or doctor said, we got to get you across to the trauma bay. And I thought, oh crap, nothing good happens in the trauma bay. So they ran me across there, and I just was progressively getting worse and worse. They got a really tenuous IV in. It was about half sticking out. And I thought, that's not going to hold up. If you've got someone with anaphylaxis, you have to really push fluids, and you want as big of an IV in and a good one. And they couldn't get it. And so my husband gets there, and he takes one look at me, and he looks at the doctor, and he said, you've got to intubate her. You're going to lose her airway. And the doctor said, no, we've got plenty of time. We're okay. And my husband said it wasn't 5 minutes, and I just collapsed.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Interesting that your husband was able to state that when the qualified doctor, didn't.
Yeah, and my husband would struggle to put a Band-Aid on you, He's not medical at all. Exactly. And so I popped out of my body immediately and was over myself in the room, and I didn't know who was in the bed, but I could hear the code call going off. And I thought, oh, I bet that's for that lady in the bed. I hope she does okay. And all the attendants were running into the room, doctors, everybody that comes on a code call, respiratory therapy, pharmacy, radiology, lab. And I remember that the guy that came from respiratory therapy had a bald spot on the crown of his head, which I couldn't have seen from the bed. And that was later verified. And then I just clicked out. I just wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere for a while. And the next place I was conscious in was my sister's car. And she was driving from Wisconsin. It was night, and this happened in the afternoon. But it was night, it was pouring rain, and something seemed wrong. And I thought, where is she going in the pouring rain? This weather is terrible. And I wondered if something had happened to the kids or my brother-in-law. And she pulled over at this gas station under a canopy, and I leaned forward, and I was careful not to get too close to her because I knew I wasn't the right density anymore. And I knew I couldn't feel the seat against my bottom or my back. And I thought, I don't want to scare her and have her wreck the car. And so she was reaching for something in her purse. And I leaned forward and her clothes were mismatched and wrinkled. And she's a redhead. And I looked at her clothes and I thought, did she get dressed in the dark out of the laundry basket? Like, what is she doing here? And she typed into her phone, it was a message to my daughter, hang on, kiddo, I'm coming. And, when I came to, that was the first thing I said to her. I saw what you wrote on Facebook. And then I was out. I was out of my body all the way, I guess, kind of, at least out of consciousness. And when I woke again, I was in this really dark void and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know the dimensions of the place that I was in. I knew I wasn't lying or sitting or standing. And I had a lot of pressure against my chest and it was taking a lot of work to breathe. I perceived that I needed to work at it. And then I thought, I can't do that. That's hurting me, that effort to breathe. And so I stopped and I was still okay. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to quit doing that, trying to breathe because that really hurts.
So outside of the body, you were still wanting to breathe and still had that sensation you needed to breathe.
Wow. Yeah. And at that time, I probably would have, I definitely would have already been on life support.
Yeah.
And so in that meantime, I never get to tell this part. In that meantime, the helicopter had shown up. There was the worst electrical storm in that town's history. And they had to get me out of there because that hospital was not equipped for how serious my condition was. And so they actually put in an intraosseous IV, which in all my years as a nurse, I'd never seen. So what they do is they take what looks like a Dremel tool and they drill an IV into your shin. And they can load you with fluids that way. And I remember when I woke up, that was my big complaint, not the ventilator, not all that stuff, but the shin bone. And so they had flown me out to the big hospital in Lexington. So in the meantime, I'm in this dark space. I can't figure out where I am or why I'm there or how I got there. And the time there seemed so protracted. Like I always tell people it felt like 10 years of time here. It was so scary. I'm claustrophobic and I had that sense of being of a pressure holding me in place, not particularly a thing, and it would just make me so claustrophobic. I would panic and then I would go back to sleep. And so I'd go back to sleep and wake up and freak out, go back to sleep and wake up and freak out and go back to sleep. and I started wondering, I thought maybe I've been banished. Maybe I did as a kid, I was Catholic. I thought maybe this is purgatory. Maybe I did something horrible and I'm banished to this place and I'm never going to get to leave. And I was trying to, there wasn't anything in me that felt there could be that much evil in me that I would be banished. I still had a sense of myself and that I was a good person. And then I started thinking, maybe you never lived that life at all. Maybe you just made it up so you wouldn't go crazy here.
Oh, wow.
And that was really upsetting because I thought, maybe I never existed. And if I did exist, no one's missing me. No one's missing me. They don't know that I'm gone. What could I have done that no one misses me? And it was the most heart-wrenching thing. And so then I would get upset and I'd get this respite with the sleep. And so I'd wake up again. And when I woke up, at one point, I thought, I got to work harder and try to figure out how to move. And so I leaned, and I had tried to move my arms before and tried to kind of squirm, but not with intention, like just trying to figure out what was holding me. But I got this idea. I thought maybe if I lean forward, and so I'm like this in the air, and I did this, and I started to move forward, and I thought, wow. Oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. And so I leaned forward more and more, and the more I leaned forward, the faster I would go. And so I'm Supermaning it in this dark space. And I thought, oh my goodness, I hope this isn't like a forest because I'm going to knock my brains out when I run into a tree. And I saw this light to my left, way, way, way up ahead. And I thought, okay, there must be some way out. I'm gonna go toward that light. So I went toward the light, and I got to it. And when I got there, there was what looked like a thick leaded glass wall. And it was really blurry. I couldn't see through it, but I knew the light was coming from the other side of that. And I got close to the wall, and I kept peering and peering and peering like a little kid would do. And when my nose hit the glass, I could see through it. And I thought, oh, wow, all right, and I saw me on the other side, and I knew it was me. And I'm like, oh, I'm just sick. I'm sick, or I'm hurt. I'm in looks like critical condition, but that means I could survive. I might get better. I don't know how I get there, but and so I started looking. I looked at there was propofol hanging from the IV pump. There was Versed. I'm like, okay, I'm in an induced coma. Looked at the drip rate, and I looked at my vital signs and thought, and I'm assessing me. I thought, okay, I'm critical but stable. And then I thought, oh, I'm a nurse. That's right, I'm a nurse. And I was so excited. I'm like, my life that I thought I had, it was real. It was real. And
Wow.
I'm lying in the bed. I'm restrained. My wrists are restrained, which is typical if a patient's on a vent. And the vent was back off and to my right, and in front of the ventilator, my daughter was standing. And I always tell people she's a Scorpio. You just never know what's going on in her. She's just so composed deep. And deep. Yeah. And I always wanted in her head so bad. And, because my mom and I are really close. We talk about everything, and she's just really private. And so I saw her there, and I looked at her eyes. And when I looked in her eyes, it was like I was sucked in, and I felt all her feelings.
Oh, wow.
It was terrible because she was
Wow.
terrified. And it was like this mix of terror and loss and grief. And it just killed me that was the first time I experienced her feelings, and that they were so scary. And so I put my arms out, and instinctively, as you would do your child, to pull her to me. And my hands hit the wall, and I lost it. I was screaming and yelling and cussing and ugly crying. And I was yelling at God, and I'm like, what is this? How could you be so cruel?
Oh,
why would you do this? Why would you show me that? Why would you show me that?
oh my gosh.
This is torture. How do I get back in there? Because, I thought, gosh, if you're going to show me, at least show me how to get back in. And I just got myself so worked up that I got sucked back into the darkness and went back to sleep. And so I woke up again, and I thought, okay, keep it together, girl. And I flew back over there. And this time the wall was like a bubble. And it looked like a bubble looks when or air is blowing against it.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is a new development. And I put my finger on the bubble, and it went through. And I remember just, okay, do I do more? Do I do more? Because you don't know. There's no guidebook. There's nothing. You're just on your own. You've got nobody to bounce anything off of. It's completely silent. There's a movie, I think it was Interstellar, where they go into outer space, and there's this noise. It's a resonance, but I couldn't really define the sound of it. But that sound you think of when you think of space, that's what it sounded like, kind of hollow and dull. And so I pushed further, and my hand went through, and I thought, oh, hot dog, this is it. And so I put my other hand through, and I popped through. And so now I'm floating over me, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm over. This must be it. I'm done now. And I thought, I think I got to get back in my body. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And I thought, okay, I got it. I'll just push myself down until I'm like right over the top of my body, and then I'll probably just get sucked back in. And so I tried that, and it didn't work. And so then I flipped back over, and I was looking at me again, and I thought, okay, I bet I have to wake her up, because if I wake up and I'm conscious in the body, then of course I'll get sucked back in. That makes perfect sense. Why didn't I think of it? And so I'm looking at me, and I'm trying to get me to open my eyes, and the me in the bed is not cooperating, as per usual. And I'm like, come on, wake up, open your eyes. And I'm like, oh. and she wouldn't do it. And so I composed myself, because I don't want to get sucked back. And I thought, maybe I'm trying too big. Maybe it needs to be something a little smaller. And so I
Mm-hmm.
looked at my pinky finger and I looked at the restraint on my hand, and that kind of started freaking me out because I'm claustrophobic. And I'm like, okay, just ignore the restraint, look at the finger. And I'm thinking, come on, you can do it. Move your finger, move your finger. Dang it, move your finger. And she wouldn't do it. And I got really frustrated and I got sucked back, but just on the other side of the wall. And so I started crying and like ugly crying. And I'm thinking, okay, this can't be meaningless. There's something here I'm not figuring out. I feel like I have to understand something, and then this is all going to change. This is all going to somehow make sense. And I thought, how did I get to this place? And it just was an epiphany. It was, you created it. And as soon as I thought I saw it, it held the most meaning to me. I made this place. In your life,
Wow.
you are building a spiritual place, whether you realize it or not. And the Bible will even tell you that. It says, build up treasures in heaven, not on earth, because the things of earth will, you know, perish. And in my life, after my divorce from my husband, um, that was such a hurt for me, that he would cheat on me, he would leave me for another woman. Um, it was just so horrible. And I had just started stacking these bricks. And every time I got hurt, I'd stack another brick. And I'm building this wall throughout my life, trying to protect myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I had just kept building and building and building until I had built my own prison. And I thought I was safe, and I guess I was, but I wasn't really living.
No.
It was all superficial. People
Yep.
liked me. I had good relationships with people at work. It never went outside that. I was so socially phobic. I had a hard time taking phone calls, even from family.
Oh, wow.
It was just progressing over the years. It was getting worse and worse. And I could function and kind of put on a happy face. But inside, I was always really anxious. Like my biggest enemy was the front door. If I could get on the other side of it, I could get out and I could do okay. But getting
Um,
through the door was torture. And and I thought, when I realized I had built it through building my own prison, basically, which so many of us do,
yeah.
it started to crack. It was like an egg. There was a crack like across the top of an egg, and this light started coming through. And I just lost it. I'm crying and laughing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's light again, and I'm going to be able to see around me. And when you've been in the dark that long, and it's so funny because the 10 years in that darkness, I mean, I had been in the dark a lot longer in my body and just never seen it, and
Okay.
had walked in that darkness and never realized it. And
Wow.
this light comes, and this huge spirit comes. Like, I mean, she was big, but the hugeness was how her spirit was. It was grand. And she came close to me, and she pulled me into her arms. She didn't touch me, but she willed me into her arms. And so I'm in her arms, and I'm like snotty, ugly crying, and I'm just losing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you, And she had this brilliant light coming off her, and when she put her arm around me, when I was in her arms, she was holding me to her, and her energy was going around us like a tornado.
Yeah.
And all the little shards of broken darkness kept trying to get to me. And she balled up her fist and she would punch the shard, and it would shatter into a million pieces and be gone.
Wow.
And she was
Wow.
vanquishing all of this darkness I had built.
Yeah.
And, just to have her rescue me from that. And so I didn't know who she was. I knew she was familiar. And so I'm looking at her face and I'm thinking, these beautiful blue green eyes. And I'm thinking, man, I know her. I know her. Remember, where do you know her from? And I looked up, and she had this orange hair that looked like flames. And I immediately knew. I'm like, this is my grandma Levita. And
Oh.
I said to her, I said, oh my, she died when I was 9. And
Uh-huh.
I said, oh my gosh, I thought you died. And she kind of laughed. She said, oh no, dear one. There's no such thing as death. Your body becomes useless and can be cast away, but you don't die. You're either alive on the earth side or you're super alive here. And I thought, oh wow, that's so smart. That makes so much sense. And she said, you know this. And I'm like, no. And she said, yes, you learned this. Remember. And and I tried to remember and I couldn't. And I'm thinking, I don't know this. Why does she think I know this? And she said, you learned this as a girl. You learned this in primary school. Energy
Oh,
isn't,
wow.
yeah, energy isn't created or destroyed. It just changes forms. That's God's law borrowed by man.
Oh,
And I thought, oh my gosh, she's right. I do know. I mean, I'm a nurse. How could I not know this? I can measure, I can put an EKG on you and measure the electricity going through you. You are absolutely energy. And and I thought, what? That the rules of the universe were violated when a person died and that energy just disappeared?
yeah.
That's foolishness. And I just so I'm crying and she says to me, calm yourself, dear one. And she's just telepathically saying these things. And I tell people, if you've ever been put to sleep for surgery, when they start giving you that medication, you can't fight it. You go to sleep. And it was like that. It was like her words broke apart into chemical form and
Okay.
soothed me.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and so I asked her. I said, "Well, am I dead?" And she said, "Oh no, love, you're kind of in between." She said, "Your
Oops.
body is still alive on the other side, and part of you is here. And if you decide to stay, your body will be done, and you'll stay here." And she said, "But there's a cord that's attaching you right now. And
Mhm.
so until you make that decision, the cord will hold you. And if you decide to stay, the cord will be severed and you'll stay here." And I thought, well, isn't that just brilliant? What a great idea. It just seems so practical. And and so she was just holding me, and I was kind of just loving that, just loving being held and accepted, and it was like we were knowing each other in
Yeah.
this spiritual way. And she had died when I was 9, and she was a force. And my mom always says, "You're your grandmother's daughter." Um, she'd had a friend who was working at the steel stamping plant with her in the 70s, and she got her arm caught in a machine and tore her arm off, and the company fired her. And my grandma came home and said, "I'm starting a union. The men have a union. We don't have a union in our plant." And I can't remember her friend's name, but she's like, she's lost everything. How is she going to support her kids? She got hurt doing her job. And so my dad was like, "Oh, Levita, don't do this. You're going to get in trouble with the bosses." And so she decided to do it anyway. And one night she didn't come home, and um, it got later and later. I was just a little girl, maybe 4, and I was waiting on the porch for her, and I kept going back in and saying, "Mom, Grandma's not here. It's getting dark. She's not here." And she said, "Oh, she's probably just running late. It's okay." And then my dad started getting nervous. And finally, it was dark, like dusk. And this big black car rolls by, doesn't stop. The door opens. My grandmother's shoved out onto the sidewalk, and they speed off. And so she comes in, and my dad's like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? What happened?" And she said, "They took me to the Detroit River, and they told me if I didn't stop, that's where I'd end up." And so she continued
No
because she
wonder
was,
she had red, fiery hair
oh, yeah,
suited up.
she was a force of nature.
Wow.
She just could not. My husband always tells me, "You have an overdeveloped sense of justice," and I do. I can't I can't stand to see people taken advantage of or lied to, or especially people who are so trusting. It just kills me. I'm like, how dare you lie to the trusting and innocent? It makes me crazy.
Mhm.
And so anyway, she left, and I was in this, just in the light, and it wasn't perfect light yet, and kind of more of just a white light that was pretty steady. And so then I kind of came back to myself and realized I was there by myself and I wasn't worried or anything. And I heard this rumbling. It was like, if you've ever been to an air show, we have this group called the Blue Angels here, and they do these air shows. And when they fly over, you can feel in fact, when I was pregnant with my daughter, we went to one and they flew over and it put me into labor. Um, because the resonance of that vibration is so strong, it actually vibrates your organs.
Wow.
And so they were able to get it stopped. I wasn't due yet, but I don't ever go to an air show if you're pregnant. And so there was that kind of rumbling, but it was more, but it wasn't painful to the ears or anything. And it was like I could see all of existence from its very inception to the end of it, and everything was shaking. Everything, things that didn't even exist yet were shaking. And I thought, oh no, it's God. Think of something good that you've done. Because I thought, he's gonna know. He could, if she could read your mind, he so can read your mind. Get some good thoughts queued up. And I'm really practical that way. And so here he's coming. I can feel him getting closer. I can feel this rumbling getting stronger, and I'm getting more and more nervous. And he gets right up to me, and I don't see a person. There's not an old man with a beard or anything like that. It's just this bright white light. And people, I always get a lot of questions on this, so I'll clear it up right now. People will say, well, you didn't see Jesus, so that bright light was probably just Satan fooling you. And so
What?
I get it a lot. And so I tell people, Gwenda, if you were to come to my house and knock on my door, I wouldn't see your body, your mind, and your spirit. It would just be you with all of that in you. And when the body, the physical manifestation of God, is together with the mind, which is God, and the spirit, which is Holy Spirit, they don't exist separately. They exist together. They're reunified. And so, yes, they were all there, and I was aware that they were all there. And so he gets right up to me and he says, I am. And I understood it. I remember hearing it all those years, in Christmas stories and different things, the great I am. And I'm like, what is that? The great I am? What does that mean? And it's just this statement. It's this statement of I am the creator of everything, everything, everything you see, everything you don't see. I made that. Everything that you can't see that you need to continue being, I made that. Um, and it, and my reaction, and I just have a comic strip brain, and I used to try to rein it in, but I'm like, God made me so. And I looked at him and I said, oh yeah, you are, because I was blown away, and I thought, wow, you really are. You are all of that. And I just immediately felt so loved and so accepted, and like I had never felt before. And so immediately this scene unfolds, and I'm thinking, oh great, we're going to go through my life. I just know it's going to be something terrible. And you're nervous. You're there with God. And he kind of had this ease come over me, like, this isn't punitive. I just want to show you some things, kind of like you would with your own kid. They're not doing their math homework right. And you're like, oh, sweetheart, when you subtract a bigger number from a little number, you have to borrow. It was like that, oh, don't sweat it, kid. We'll figure this out. And so he showed me this scene where I was in this grocery store, and it was after I'd left my husband, and there was a woman in line ahead of me, and she had a bunch of stuff you could tell was for kids and a few things for her, and she got her total and she didn't have the money to pay it. And she immediately grabbed some moisturizer to put it back, and I knew that was for her. And here I'm a single mom with 3 kids and had just so struggled. And I said, wait, let me help. I've got it. It was just change. And she was humiliated. She just turned so red. She said, no, oh, it's okay. And I said, please, let me do this. I've been there. And she just kind of teared up, and I gave her the change, and I didn't say anything else. And I thought, wow, that's the theme you pick for my whole life. I've saved people's lives. I've done big things. That. And he said, oh, but let me show you. And so this next scene opens up, and it's this woman working in a food pantry, and a woman who does not have enough food to feed her kids walks through the door, and there's that woman standing behind the counter that I helped. And she said, come in. And the lady said, I don't have enough money to buy food. I need some food. And she said, let me help you. Somebody helped me once. And I thought, you're kidding. You're, that little kindness is still rippling forward and changing the world. That's I I can't tell you how many little kindnesses that I talked myself out of doing in my life.
Oh, wow.
You know, you God kind of, you feel this urging inside to go and talk to somebody, or to give money to this or to that, or to volunteer to go do this thing, and you somehow talk yourself out of it before you ever, make the commitment. You justify it. Oh, I don't know these people, and maybe they wouldn't want me to volunteer. However you do it, but we do it all the time. And I saw that. Look at all of the world changing that you could have done through little things that you didn't do just because you didn't know. And I thought, okay, now I know. And so then, the negative thing had to come, and I had some things in mind that I was worried about, and God showed me something I would have never thought of. And I have never been a person to gossip. I've always just thought that was the most hurtful thing anybody could ever do. And I felt like, if you're willing to slash somebody to death with your tongue the moment they walk away, then I know you're doing that to me too. And someone has to stand for that person. Even if you're right, someone has to stand. If you've got a problem with someone, talk to them. Don't slander them to everybody else. And then pretend to be their friend. And it's, in nursing, we see it so much because it's a female profession. And in the States, it's one of the big things that runs women out of nursing. They've actually done studies on it. And
Wow.
so I worked with this nurse, and she was, what in my mind, and I would never have said it out loud, she was lazy. And it just drove me crazy because I would get like all of my work done and then go around to my coworkers and say, hey, are you stuck? Can I help? Have you had a break yet? Just because I love that about nursing, that you have all this autonomy, and if you get a good team,
Yep.
it's so rewarding, because you can help, newer nurses and help them bring their skills along, and older nurses who've put in their time and are tired, you can bless them. And it's just, there's so many neat ways you can be as a nurse. And I just love that. And I'm that way just in life in general. And, she would be sitting there right by a patient's room, knowing that a patient had just got put on a bedpan, knowing that the patient was thin and fragile and had fragile skin, and the call light going off, and knowing that the tech has 12 other patients and it's going to be 30 minutes before she can get in there, and just let that patient ring and ring and ring and
Yep.
call for help. And it just killed me. I had to go in. So then I'm taking care of her patients and mine. And, but, I never said anything to her. I was always kind to her. And I thought, why this? And God said, examine your thoughts. And I immediately was there, like with my thoughts. And I thought, wow, how can you be so lazy? Why are you in nursing? You can hear, I know you can hear that call light go off, but heaven forbid you get off your butt and go do something that you feel is beneath you. And I'm berating her in my head, in my heart. And God said, you didn't say it, but you thought it. And when you think something, there's an energy that comes off of you, and people can sense it. And it doesn't have as much energy as a spoken word or as an action, but eventually those things all come out. Some one way or another, the person's spirit senses it. And you're making it harder for her to be a good nurse because she can sense that tension. What could you have done differently? And I thought, it never even occurred to me to do anything differently. I thought I was being a good person by not saying it out loud, and God's like, couldn't you have come alongside her and just said, hey, that patient's calling out is on the bedpan. Come on, I'll go help you. Let's get her off there and get her cleaned up. And it just never, I was too busy being irritated and blaming her for it that I didn't even think to do the most obvious thing. And then God showed me her life. And he showed me that from the time she was little, her dad had been abusing her sexually. And she had turned to drugs at one point in her teen years and almost was lost to that, and had, been raped, and just all these different things that come from that early trauma, that so many women fall into. And I thought, oh my gosh, no one ever cared for her. And she chose a caring profession.
Amazing.
She's doing 10 times better, a million times better than she should be. And I was judging her. And it changed me. And I always tell people, they get really freaked out about the void, and they get really freaked out about looking at the negative in your life. But my time in the void and my time looking at just that one negative thing um, has completely changed my life. Because when you get your brain around it, when you start learning to take control of your own thoughts, you're mastering life. Because we all live in our heads, and you create anxiety, and you create anger and hatred and bitterness, or you can create love and forgiveness, and you can be empathetic. And we get so wound up in our own heads that, we assume our perception on everything is 100% accurate.
Yeah.
We block out anybody who's got a different idea from ours, even if they can provide us proof. We won't hear it. We're so locked in, and I see that more and more. We're in these birthing pains. I feel like as a world, and I see people doing that. I see them completely closing themselves off from opposing opinions, or from people who are doing things that they don't agree with. And I'm like, you cannot agree with those things, but yours is not to judge them. Yours is to have empathy and compassion. And that's the only way that those two polar opposite views can live together, is through empathy and compassion. And somebody has to model it. And so I'm there with God, and I have this knowing. He didn't speak it, but I knew in my spirit that we were to go on a journey of sorts together. And it felt like, to do that, I was going to have to get naked in front of an audience. That's how I can, explain it to you here. And I always tell people, I met my husband that I'm married to now, and I was 40. And when you're 40, things are just in different places than they were when you were 20. And thank God for underwear and wiring that holds it all together, right? And I remember thinking, when I met my husband, he has no idea what I really look like. One day I'm going to have to get naked in front of this man, and my boobs are going to hit the floor, and he's going to be like, lies, lies. and the secret's going to be out, and the truth will be known, and I'll be humiliated.
Oh, dear.
And that's what it felt like with God. I felt like he wasn't intruding into me and knowing me. He wanted my permission. And I did. And in that moment, I bristled up, and I got angry, and I said, you know what? No. You say you love me. You say you love us. But when my kid's dad left, it was hard enough that they left me, but I'm an adult. I can do that. I can take it. But he left them, and he would call, and he would promise he was going to send a card or a gift or whatever. And I would watch those kids walk out to that mailbox and look in the mailbox, and there'd be nothing there, and then walk back brokenhearted, day after day after day. What kind of God allows that? And I was so angry. I was so bitter. And God said, oh my goodness, dear one, you've completely misunderstood me. Let me show you something. So he kind of opens up this scene again, and I'm sitting in this soccer field in the bleachers with my son. And when I had my near-death experience, my grandson was 2, but in this scene it was 3 years forward, and he was 5. And I'm sitting next to my oldest son, David, who was 5 when his dad left. The other 2 were really little. And so I feel like he was the most impacted by the memory of the leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked at me, and he said, and I could see my grandson running up and down the field, and the sun was shining on his hair, and he was so tan and so alive, and just big smile, and everything that you just want to love, get on you from a kid. And my son looks at me, and he says, Mom, I'm going to be the dad to him that I deserved. And it was like somebody just poured water on me and just washed all the hurt away, and I said, oh my gosh, you're breaking that chain. You're breaking that bond, the bondage of fatherless children in this family with my generation. And I thought, okay, we'll take one for the team. And I thought, if my grandkids, great grandkids are going to, be able to live a life without abandonment, then it's worth it. and we're tough and we can take it for one more generation. We'll do it. And it was just so affirming for me that God could bring beauty from ashes and turn our suffering to something good. And I watch my kids with their kids, and they're incredible. They're incredible with no real model, and it's so funny because they're all either agnostic or atheist. I don't know how this happened. And we're trying to love them through that because, part of, I think, especially with my oldest son, it is very hard to understand and accept a loving God called Father when you didn't have a father that was loving.
Yeah.
And they hold him responsible, and he's very angry at God. And he was a believer when he was younger, and I just remind myself, God's word does not return void, and raise a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, he will not turn from that. And I see him doing a good job with his kids. I'm like, you've got the basics in there. You're doing all of the God things. You just don't want to call it that, and that's okay because it'll be our secret, and I'll love you still. And when he showed me that, it just melted my heart for God. And so I'm standing there, and now I perceive that I'm naked, and this light comes off of him, kind of like almost like an arm, without just kind of like that shape, and it touches my toes, and when it touches my toes, it goes into my feet, and it's warm, and I can see the light as it's coming up through me, and so it's like this golden white, and there's little flecks of gold in it, and those flecks of gold are putting off as much light as God is, and so it's just being magnified and magnified and magnified, and it comes up through my legs, up through my pelvis, and it gets at my gut, and I can feel it swirling around, healing all these visceral hurts that I had. And you don't realize that every one of those hurts leaves a little imprint on. You have cellular memory, and your cells remember these things. And I know this is true because we see people who have transplants. So you'll have somebody have a heart transplant or a liver or whatever, and they'll start having memories. They'll start having urges to do things that they never did, and it'll be from that person who they got the organ from. That cellular memory is coming over. And so I know that there's a cellular memory for the hurts in our lives. And God was just beginning to heal those in me. And it started going around my heart and softening my heart. My heart had gotten so hard. And it came up through my throat. And when it hit my tongue, it lit my tongue up with singing. And then it went up, and it was going to come out my eyes. And I squeezed my eyes shut, and it shot out my eyelashes. It's like that old movie with Jimmy Stewart, where he says, what do you want, Mary? Do you want the moon? And she says, yeah, I want the moon. And Jimmy Stewart says, I'll lasso the moon, and I'll catch it for you, and you can gobble it up, and the moonbeams will shine out your eyelashes and out the tips of your hair. It was like that. And so the light of God shines through my eyelashes. I can't contain it. I don't know what made me think I could. And it hits the light that's on the outside, and it bounces back in, and it starts going through all the curves in my brain. And I had never felt so awake and alert in my life, like spiritually awake, awake to what's really going on in the universe. I know that I knew all things, and I knew that I would not be allowed to remember them. And I was so frustrated by that. I'm like, oh, and as these lights would go off and I would realize these truths that everybody wanted to know, as soon as the light would leave that part, that light would go dim again. And I'm like, oh, man, that would have been good to remember. And so then that was kind of just this sort of healing process for me. And it was just the beginning of my healing. And so then God took my hand and he said, come on. And we start what it feels like flying. And we somehow have gotten inside me, and we're going through my DNA, through all the little chromosomes, all the codons, all the things that make us who we are. And we get to this one part, and we stop. And he looks at me, and I almost can perceive a face. I wish I could get my brain around it to describe it. But I felt like I was looking into a face, and he said, do you see me? And I was like, of course I see you. You're everywhere. And he said, no. And he pointed to this little spot in my DNA that's known as they call it junk DNA. And he pointed to it and he said, no, do you see me? And I looked and I could see his fingerprints all over me, all over my organic structures. And I knew in that moment that he had knit me together in my mother's womb. And I knew that there was a point in time where he had thought me up. And I wondered, I thought, is it like how when I was pregnant with my kids and I'd put my hand on my belly and feel them move and wonder what they would be like and what they would accomplish and what their children would be like. And I thought, did God love me in his mind like that? Did he think, I'm going to make somebody named Penny and I'm going to make her all these things and I'm going to have such great plans for her. And I wondered how long he thought about me before he set his hand to the work of making me. Just as a loving parent does, we plan, sometimes you don't, but sometimes you do plan your children and we're always planning in our minds for their future and what we want for them. And I felt that. I felt that there was this moment where God thought up me and thought it was a good idea. And I thought, wow, I thought I was a good idea. And I started kind of thinking about whether I wanted to stay or not. And I immediately said yes, I was staying. Because I'd never been loved like that and I wasn't going to leave. And as soon as I said it, I knew it was wrong. And I thought, I can't stay. He knit me together. He thought this life up for me. And I fell so far short. And he doesn't care. He'll let me stay. He loves me. But I got to go back and do it right. I have people counting on me and I've shortchanged me. And how many people could I help if I went back and actually did what I was put there to do? Should that labor fall on someone else? That was mine to do. And I thought, okay, I'll go back. And as soon as I thought it, I started pulling backwards. I could feel this chasm growing between me and God. And I started crying and I'm like, wait. And he stopped and I said, let me remember it. Because if I don't remember it, I'll lose all hope. I woke up. I'm in the ICU. There's a nurse sitting there right next to me. And I looked at her and I said, I was with God.
And she said,
she patted, I'm in a faith-based hospital. She pats my hand and she's like, oh, that's nice, dear. And I said, no, I mean, just now, like just a minute ago, I was with God. And she's like, let me go get your family. And she actually put down a psych consult for me.
Oops.
And I'm like, wow, if you can't say you met God in a faith-based hospital when you've almost died, there's really no place you can say it. And so the family came in. As soon as I saw my sister, I told her I saw what you wrote on Facebook. And things have been weird between us ever since. It's so upsetting. And so anyway, they all leave and go. The nurse is like, this has been a lot. She needs to rest. And so they leave and I'm just alone in the room and they finally turned off the lights. I always tell ICU nurses, please don't leave your patients' lights on all night because a lot of times when you're in a coma, your eyes aren't all the way closed. And I could see red and green rods for days because my eyes had been open a little bit in that fluorescent light for so many days. And so anyway, I'm in the room, the lights are finally off, the curtains are pulled because they're just these big glass sliding doors. And God reappears in the room, scares me to death. I scream, right? And he starts cracking up. And he said, what is it? I said, you scared me. And he said, why? And I said, well, you just show up, you just pop into a room like that. He said, well, I'm always here. And I said, yes, but not like that. He knew. And he gave me this message, and he said, I want you to share this with the world. And so I shared it with no one because it was the most beautiful love letter I'd ever read. And I thought, no one has ever written me a love letter. And can I just have this one thing for me? And part of why I didn't share it with anyone was because I was still so sick. I was in the hospital in a coma the first time, I think, for 5 days. Within 2 or 3 weeks, I was back in with the same thing. In 2.5 years, I had 18 episodes of respiratory failure and was on the ventilator in comas every time. And
So you were really just trying to get back with God, Penny. You were trying to have
I think
another
so.
conversation.
I
Get
think
him
so. I
back.
really do. I think I couldn't reconcile myself to the task of being in my body. And
Wow.
I just kept being so sick. And we never knew when it was going to strike. We never were able to link it to any sort of allergy.
Wow.
We finally figured out it's called a mast cell activation disorder. It's an autoimmune thing. And the doctors told us that generally what happens is it either stops at 2.5 or 3 years or people die. And so the last time it happened, I popped out of my body again and was with God immediately and was what we call in Kentucky giving him down the road, which means fussing at him. And I said, "What are you doing? For the love of you, either keep me or send me back and heal me. This is crazy." And he said, "It's not me, it's you." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's me? You're God." And he said, "Look, I keep putting things in your path to do and people in your path to love. And you keep saying no. You said you wanted to go back. You said you wanted to live." And I'm like, "Okay." And he said, "You've got to say yes." And I thought it was the most asinine thing I'd ever heard. I said, "You're telling me that I just need to go back and say yes and I'm going to be okay." And he said, "Yes." And I thought, well, that's ridiculous, but he's God, so I'll give it a go. And I got home, and my friend Brian, who runs a support group for people who've lost parents called Grief to Growth, had asked me several times to come to Cincinnati and speak to the IAMS group there. It's the International Association for Near Death Studies. And I had come up with every excuse in the world not to do it. And he messaged me when I got out of the hospital and said, "Hey, I saw you were in the hospital again. How are you doing?" And I, told him I was doing okay. And he said, "Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Don't say anything else. Just go, because I will make up something so that I don't have to do it." And he was my very first yes. And I went and I did that talk, and I've done every talk since. And I've never had another episode of anaphylaxis. It still took me a long time to get well.
Mhm.
But I told somebody one day, they thanked me for something. It was somebody that had messaged me because they'd seen the near death experience. And I talked to that person for a really long time via email. And I said, "You know what? Don't thank me. I feel like this is totally selfish on my part. Loving you heals me." And it's
Wow.
true every day that you put yourself out there and you, especially when you don't want to, especially when it's hard and you love someone else, it heals some little wound in you. And it's life changing. I mean, if you take nothing else away from this, people ask me all the time, how do you know what your purpose is? And we think it's this big grand thing that's a mystery, and it's not. I'm like, your purpose is what's in front of you that day, you
Yeah.
know? And I said, you've probably got a little old lady that lives on your street that struggles to get her trash cans to the curb every week. And you've probably thought, man, that she's really having a hard time. Go down there and do that. That's your purpose that day. Maybe that's your purpose every Tuesday. um, you feel the prodding inside you. You don't quite know what it is, but something's urging you to do this or do that, or go talk to that person. Act on it, and that's your purpose. It's not. I think people think because they're only making small differences that the differences don't matter, and whether they did them or not doesn't matter, and it does. It's all those small kindnesses. Those, we're the hands and feet of God.
Yeah.
And if you can't put your hand, on somebody who's upset and comfort them, then there's no God in the world. We're holding it back. And I'm like, do you want to hold back God in the world? And it's scary. There's so much going on. You and I were talking before the show. I won't get you any strikes here. I'll be careful. But
Yeah,
um,
we know.
yeah,
Most of our audience knows too.
yeah, all that truth get you in trouble. Um,
Mm.
when all of this started with COVID and everything, Um, I got sick March 12th of 2020. And I mean, that was right at the get-go. We knew nothing. And I thought, if anybody's going to die from this, it's going to be me. And I didn't feel like I'd had enough time to do all the work I wanted to do yet. And I thought, okay, but you don't pick your day. Um, so if I'm going to go out, I got to go out doing something. I got to be helping people. If I'm going to die from this ridiculous virus, I need it to mean something.
Yeah.
And so I just started teaching. I started doing talks for medical groups on Facebook. I got so much hate over the one medication that I was talking about. And it was, I had a nurse say to me, and it was a nurse who had a Facebook profile picture, or that picture that goes behind your profile. I don't know what that's called. Um, and it was a picture of a nurse standing in a counter charting, and Jesus behind her with his hand on her shoulder. And this nurse said to me, I think if I was really as sick as you were, I'd be getting well and not looking for attention on Facebook.
Oh,
And
would you thank her very much and
I,
give her a little hug?
you know what? It's so funny when I think when you are acting out of your love for God and your love for people, you don't often have to defend yourself because people will jump to it for you. And,
Yeah.
people went after her, and I'm like, hey guys, she's living in her own trouble. Um,
Yeah.
it's probably enough punishment just to be in there.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
So
people don't realize it.
Penny, are you ready to share God's love letter?
Yes, let me get it. Hold on.
Thank you.
I thought I brought my phone. Hold on a second. It's easier for me to read there. Oh, it's so far away. We have our so I do a podcast twice a week. I do a book club on Wednesday mornings. We just finished Jesus, the God Who Knows Your Name, and it was so good. And before that, we read Jonathan Cahn's The Return of the Gods, which is really good.
Oh, okay.
And then on Friday nights we do a podcast, and so we've got the RV set up as a studio, which is a nice little space. It's quiet out here, and all right. Think what
It's
I'm
funny
doing.
you mention purpose, because I've been talking and doing masterclasses on purpose in my
Oh,
society, Spirit Seekers Society. And purpose is something that always makes people trip up in their life. Is my purpose big enough? What am I supposed to be doing? And it should be grandeur, and it should be something with status. And that's just all part of the conditioned world, as I was explaining to them.
well,
So tell us.
we're always sizing ourselves up next to other people, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're taught to do that,
Mm-hmm.
taught to do that from the get-go. And then
Yeah.
the schools encourage, all that sort of thing. So,
Yeah. There's a really good school. It's called the Waldorf model. Have you heard of that?
yes, we have some Waldorf here.
Um,
Yep.
and I don't know of them personally, but I do know of their kind of structure, and it's very much interdependence, independence, the yin and yang of that. You need both. And we get so out of balance, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
too easily.
it's so easy if every day you can say to yourself, am I balanced? Have I spent some time nurturing my spirit and my body and my mind? Have I spent time doing something for others? Just a real little checklist for yourself. Don't go to bed till you've done something for someone else. I mean, I was doing a podcast one day, and my husband had come in from mowing the grass, and this is when I was still doing them in the living room. And I said, "Oh, thanks for mowing the grass, babe. That looks great." And he said, "Thanks for dinner. That was really good." And we just do this all the time. It's very natural. And it so struck the people watching. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you thank your husband for mowing the grass?" And I'm like, I don't want to mow the grass. It's a sweaty, awful. I would push that mower. I got a bad shoulder. I'm absolutely thankful he does it. And he'd starve to death if he had to cook dinner. Um, and yeah, we do not show simple gratitudes to the person you love. That's a real good place to start if you've gotten lazy about that. I'm so bad. If I ask Alexa what time it is and she tells me, I thank her.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it.
AI.
My husband's like, do you know you thank Alexa? And I said, do I? He said, yeah, it's kind of weird, babe. So now I don't thank her, and I feel kind of guilty every time.
No, you don't.
I do. I'm like, that seems so rude. And if AI is intelligent and it's getting more intelligent, it probably thinks I'm a real jerk because I used to thank her and I don't, which is worse than not ever thanking her to begin with. The heck, I'm surely going to hell for that. I'm not. So this is the message from God. God said, such folly to think that anything escapes my knowing, as when you were with me, all at once, all that I allowed you to know, you knew. No words were spoken, nor were they shouted. I whispered them to your spirit. I discreetly filled you with knowing. Knowing flowed into you as effortlessly as taking a breath. Is it not so? The great I am. No truer words have ever been spoken or written. The great I am is in your core. The great I am is the light. Even when I'm hidden, still I am. As my energy charged, sending me over each synapse in your brain, even the small fibers knew that I am. They rose and fell to the rhythm I created, to the symphony I composed, I conducted. I consider it a tragic comedy of arrogance when man denies what the smallest innervation knows. Man thinks he acts and moves outside my knowledge. How could it be so? I proclaim he does not. His own fibers clutch themselves, laughing at the idea. I am the flower, the wind, the rain, the sinew, the marrow, the rock, the author, the maker, the touch that set in motion all that you see, all that you know, and all that you do not see or know. I knit you. I put breath in you. I am coded in every cell. Every nanosecond of time falls in step as I will it so. I am in you. I am in you. I am all. Even when you perceive nothing, still I am. As I tell you this here and now, pressing my truth into your breast, your very heart presses it further in. And I have a little thing that I wrote after, and I think it's important because I do a lot of these talks and we don't get to talk about the after effects very much. I was so profoundly changed by my experience. I'm open to being hurt and to being loved. I think being open to being loved was even harder than being open to being hurt. I am learning that hurt people hurt people. I try to use kind words to turn away anger. It doesn't always work, but a soft word rarely hurts. It seems easier to discern the difference between my own internal chatter and the promptings of the Holy Spirit. God continues to do profound things in and through me. I've definitely had many difficult challenges, but I see them differently. I can choose to let circumstances break me or take those opportunities to become more. I try to engage with other people in a more real and meaningful way. I'm learning to be more authentic and vulnerable, especially when being vulnerable is hard. If I feel sad, I'm much less likely to hide it. If I feel anger, I'm more likely to temper it with love, or at least understanding. I am flawed, and beautifully so. Love carries us while pain and mistakes build us. Every awful thing is an opportunity. We can shrink from it or rise to it. I choose to rise. I used to build walls to protect myself, but the thing with wall building is this. While walls do keep people out, they also keep you in. You make yourself a captive and unwittingly become your own jailer. You limit all potential. I've been taking down those walls. Every day I tear down a bit more, one brick at a time. My prison is looking a lot like rubble these days. It lays all around me and I refuse to put it back up. I refuse. I am climbing on top of the remains and rubble. I see freedom on the other side and I am claiming it. I am taking it back. I'm taking back all I surrendered. I refuse to make myself a slave or a captive. Not after all God has done for me. Not after how he loved me and healed me. He saw me, all of me, the good and the bad. Instead of hiding from him in shame, I chose to surrender in his presence. In that moment, when I laid myself bare before God, he took all my shame and vanquished it. He took all the good in me and magnified it. He made me more, and I refuse to squander it. God is giving me a do-over. He's giving me life and love and people to connect with. That's all in front of me now. And rather than hide, I choose to say yes. I choose to say yes. I will not shrink from it. I hope his light still shines from me. I hope it continues to just pour out, because to keep it for only myself would be theft. To give it, that's my gain. Loving others is a choice, and that choice heals me every day. That's that.
It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Penny, and thank you for sharing God's love letter with us.
Oh, yes, I have to do it now. I don't want to get chastised.
Don't want him appearing back in the side of the room going, now what are you doing with that letter?
Did I tell you about the letter? 100 times I told you, like we do with our kids. I was telling my husband this weekend, We had kind of just a little abrasiveness with some family this weekend, and I said, it's interesting, um, the way God will use situations in our lives, especially with our kids, to show us His relationship with us.
Yeah.
And so, my child was like saying all of the things that he knew would trigger us. Um, and
Only a
he
child can do.
right, yeah, he's grown, and he mentioned that his youngest daughter, who's little, had in private said GD, and that they had overheard it. And I thought, why would you tell us this story? Like now I know he's doing it just to trigger. I don't think he realizes that's why he's doing it, but I think he's he so struggles because his father left, that he pokes to see if you'll still love him even if he's not being
Yeah.
lovable. And I was so proud of the way my husband handled that, because he was very kind and gentle, and my son still got mad and got up and walked away. And
Oh,
he said, you all need to just be less thin-skinned. He said, it's not like racism where it actually hurts somebody who's actually a living thing. And
wow.
I said, God, our God is a living God. And he got mad and he walked away, and we sat there for a while, and my husband was upset. He's like, I don't know how I could have handled that any better. And I said, I support you in the way you handled that. There are times when you have to draw a line, and I think this was the time, and you did it gently, but firm. And it was so funny because we sat there and we were trying to sort through being heard about it, and he came back and apologized. And I thought, wow, I'll take that.
It's
you know
beautiful.
I don't need him to believe what I believe, but it
No.
would be nice to get the same respect that he expects. And it's interesting that generation's kind of weird that way. Like, they want all this accommodation, um, for whatever they believe, but they're hard pressed to give it back.
Mm.
And I'm
Not
like,
receptive to receiving
yeah,
different,
yeah, or
different.
or even
Mm.
just saying, hey, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I think that's messed up, but we don't have to believe the same things. It's okay.
Mm. So,
So,
Penny, from your near-death experience and your little chats with God, what would be one of the most wonderful things you could leave the audience with in regards to a relationship with God?
oh, it is so worth investing the time in. I think people don't know where to start, right? I think, I every day somebody sends me an email and they're like, I wish I could have an experience like you, but I don't want to die. And I'm like, you don't have to die to have an experience like me. You just have to be willing to put in the time to build the relationship.
Yeah.
And so, I tell people all the time, would you expect an intimate relationship with your significant other if you never spoke to them? If you
Yeah.
never did anything to learn about who they are and what their dreams and passions and desires are, would you expect that relationship to grow? Of course not. It's easy to grow apart in a relationship when you do know a person.
Mm. Very,
Um,
very.
and you've got to take that time every day. And it is, I will acknowledge that it's difficult because it feels like it's a one-way interaction for a while. And that's okay, because what's happening during that time is you're starting to discern the difference between your internal musings and the whispers of the Holy Spirit. And it takes practice. So when I'm praying, and I'm in prayer a lot, even though it may not look like I'm in prayer, I
Yep.
washing dishes and I'm praying, I'm conversing with God, I'm focusing on the higher things of heaven, on what is beautiful and lovely, and patient, and all of those things. Because if you focus on all of the things of the world, you really become worldly, even though you don't like it. Um, and you have to, it's kind of like friending up. I used to tell my kids, it's okay to have friends that aren't quite where you are, but make sure you have really good friends who are where you'd like to be.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
because
That is beautiful.
they'll pull you up, and in return you'll pull up the people who aren't quite where you are. It works for everyone. And it's
Yeah.
that way with God. So if you just sit down, and I know it's going to feel futile for a lot of people at first, but just talk to God like you would talk to anybody else. Say,
Yeah.
God, like today I told you was a really hard day for me. And
Yes.
before the
Yeah.
show, we lost someone, and before the show, I had to tell my brother, and it was just so difficult. And and you said to me, maybe God will bring something out of this that will be helpful for you. And I just feel my spirit grabbing that and saying, yeah, God is still here.
Yeah.
God is still very much in control. You're not flailing. You're not falling without somebody's hand to grab you. And you've just got to take that time and just have, and we talked today on my podcast. I was telling people, you've got to have a jumping off point with God. And I think a lot of people think they need to get themselves together first.
No,
And that is so
no.
backward.
Yeah, absolutely.
God wants your mess. It's like a little kid, right? You wouldn't expect you, and we're like little kids to God. I mean, he knows everything. We're definitely little kids to him. And I think we get this idea that, would you expect your 2-year-old to clean their room and learn to write and learn to drive and everything before they came to talk to you about a problem? No, that's ridiculous. And yet we put ourselves on that impossible journey. And it's just, you just go to God. And I said, if you're mad at God, you can start there. That's a great place to jump off. If you're bitter and pissed off because you feel like, God has shortchanged you or didn't come when you called, tell them about it. And I told folks, I said, get a piece of paper and write God on one side and write church and church people on the other. Because first of all, you got to get straight about who's wronged you. Because a lot of people think the church and church people speak on behalf of God, and they often do not. People are everywhere, and that is the fallibility of life, is that people are everywhere. And so if you make that paper and you've got God over here and you've got church and church people over here, because so many people are church hurt and that's why they walk away from God, write the things that the church and the church people did in the appropriate column. And then write the things that you're actually bitter at God for in the God column. Go to God with that list. Say, look, this is the stuff you've done that's really pissed me off. I cannot have a relationship with you because I am so bitter and so hurt. I prayed for you to fix this. I prayed for you to heal this person. That person died. You didn't fix this thing. It only got worse. And I have had all I can take of you. And people keep telling me I need to serve you. You're horrible. And I'm like, it's God. He can take it. You think he doesn't know all of that already?
That's right.
He just needs you to give voice to it so he can say to you what he said to me. Oh, dear one, you've completely misunderstood me. He is on, if your car is, if you're in a traffic jam and you're in a valley, and you think, oh my gosh, this traffic is so backed up. I'm never going to get out of here. I'm going to be late. And you turn your car around and 2 minutes later, you see all the traffic moving. It's because of your vantage point. You're down low. You can't see that the wreck's being cleared up ahead. God is up on the hill. He can see. He could have told you if you'd asked, hey, just hang here another minute or two. This is going to clear up.
Yeah, so true.
I think that is the important thing, to be your human self with all of your flaws and all of your messed upness, and go to God and say, man, I am a hot mess. I'm doing all these things that I know you don't like, and I don't particularly care to quit doing them. But I would like to be friends with you. I would like for us to work some things out. So at least I can have some peace and move past those things. And you will be amazed at how God will be receptive to that and really show himself to you in ways that only God could.
That's right. I say to people, the angels and God know more about you than you ever will.
Yep.
And if you're in a really hot mess, ask to see through the eyes of God.
Yes.
That's my go-to. If I can't find peace in something, I will go into prayer and I say, show me through the eyes of God.
Well, and you're
show
right.
me through your eyes, God.
Because the angels and God are actually conspiring for your good.
Yes, always.
You might not realize that. You've got a cheering committee up there that's like, come on, do it. You can do it. Put that thing down. It's hurting you. It's hurting your life. Walk away from it. And we're so scared, we are unbound, but we cling to our chains. And
very much so. Very much so.
Let them go. You can walk away. I tell people who have anxiety all the time, I say, look, let's pretend anxiety is a suitcase. And you're going to just set it down for a minute. Set it down where you can still see it. You don't have to give it up yet. But just set it down and just walk away like 3 feet. You can still look at it. but just know that you've walked 3 feet away from it. And as soon as you're ready, you can go back and pick it up. But then next time, walk a little further. And next time, maybe walk outside the room and stand just outside the door and do it as a physical exercise.
Yeah.
Pack the bag heavy. And we've done that. We've had some people that have packed a bag with bricks and carried it around. I'm like, carry it around for as long as you can until your arms won't carry it anymore. And then set it down. And you will be amazed at the freedom that that will give you. And start visualizing yourself doing that with fear and anxiety. So many people, Gwenda, COVID has scared people to death.
Yeah. Well, that was part of the plan.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. So fear in a culture, and you've got them.
There's so many people are fearful of themselves. They're fearful of what's, like you said, about the other side of the door. They're just fearful of what's there. And it's all been constructed.
Yeah. And it's such a shame because we're so powerful.
Yes. Well, that's what's not wanted, isn't it?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And when we align with God and we align with our own divinity, another phrase I have is, I am in God as God is in me.
Yes.
And I say that to myself throughout the day. And I just leave it at that because I believe it. And we could talk about beliefs, but there's a difference between unwavering faith and a belief that's been passed on to you through family or whatever.
Sure.
So, yeah, he's there all the time, 24/7, waiting, and even answering, like you said. He said, well, I've sent all these people and I've sent this to you, and you go, I'm going this way.
Yeah.
And we do all the time. We have so many signs. We're answered constantly, but we're here and we get in the way with our own thoughts. And we believe that the answer needs to look like this, or we believe we need this. And he's like, no, this is what's going to help you.
And people are so quick to attribute anything bad or negative or painful to God and not attribute anything good to God. I'm like, wait a minute, that's unfair. When you do something good, you make sure you get the credit for it, that somebody knows, right? And I think, what if, even if I'm wrong, even if none of the good things come from God, what could possibly be hurt by you being grateful for that thing and attributing it to a higher intelligence? What would be wrong with saying, I wasn't sure how we were going to get through to the next paycheck, and then somebody sent me $40 they owe me. Thank you, God, for that. Yes. Thank you for that intervention in my life. Thank you for taking care of me and showing me that you'll take care of me. And when you start developing that attitude of being grateful, that will change your life, because you walk in bitterness so long, you become so hard. And, I've got family members that are so hard and so bitter. And I said to somebody one day, I said, I'll feel I did well in this life if my funeral is well attended. And that person said to me, oh my gosh, you're so arrogant. And I'm like, no. If I leave this world without it impacting people, I didn't do something right. My grandmother, we couldn't fit the people in the building.
Oh, wow. Bless her. That's
beautiful. She had such an impact on people. She was ferocious, but boy, if you were her friend, she would fight for you to the death. And I tell people all the time, sit down and write your own eulogy. It's the best exercise you'll ever do.
It's an exercise I use in my soul pathways.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, it's such a good one.
Because people to write their own eulogy, and so many are very uncomfortable with it to start with. And
you have to acknowledge you're going to die.
Lots of emotions come up, but it's a powerful exercise.
It is, because you're writing down what you want people to say about you when you're gone. And I remember writing mine, and I think I found the idea. I think it was in the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. Okay. And great book. And I sat down and I thought about it. I pondered it. I agonized over it, every word. And this was before my near-death experience. And I came up with something, that was very forgettable. And but it was always in my mind, going forward. Gosh, I don't know what I'd want people to say about me. And then I had my near-death experience, and walked through the healing and all of the trouble that came afterward. I mean, trying to adjust to life here after being in perfect love is very difficult. I was suicidal at points. I've never been so homesick in my life. And I sat down one day and I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And I thought, I think I'll have lived a good life if somebody could get up and say, when you knew Penny, you knew somebody that was so overflowing with God's love that when you got close to her, you couldn't help but get it all over you. And when you were with her, you felt like you could be more. And when you walked away, you knew you could be more. And I thought,
Yeah,
if people,
that's beautiful.
yeah, if people, and it's simple, but if people,
Yeah.
if in my funeral somebody would stand up and say that, then this will have been a life well lived.
Yeah. That's another part of the exercise that I ask people to do is imagine you're walking through your wake. What would you want to hear people say?
Yeah.
And that is uncomfortable too, but yeah, we work through it. It's amazing.
But it's, think about it though. I think it's so funny, and you as a nurse will understand this too. Death is the most neglected phase of life.
Yeah.
We celebrate births and weddings and kindergarten graduations and half birthdays. I mean, there's a donut day, and we have a federal donut holiday in this country. It's ridiculous. The things that we celebrate,
Oh my.
And I think, and attending so many deaths as you do in ICU, and we did in the step down unit we did terminal weans. So these are people that are lucid, are on the ventilator, usually like end stage COPD or something, and they've decided they don't want to live on the ventilator anymore. And so we'll do a terminal wean. And, you turn off the ventilator and you're just at their side with family, with medications to help them be comfortable, and you see them out. And not intentionally, you're just there making them comfortable as the process goes. And I remember just thinking the first time I did that, what a neglected phase it was. People don't want to talk about it. They don't know what to say after it. They say the most ridiculous, hurtful things after it. Oh, God needed an angel. I'm like, God needs nothing. He needs nothing. Don't ever tell anybody that. Just say, I'm sorry. That's all you have to say. I'm sorry for your loss. This must be very difficult.
And why did God take you? Why did God take them? No, God doesn't take anybody.
No. We all have an expiration date. It's just the truth.
Stamped on there somewhere.
Yes. And I think it's known in us somewhere before we ever come.
Absolutely.
Attending those people at their side, I always just thought, what an honor to be at this bedside with this family and this person, holding their hand over onto the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful.
Because you really are going home. You've been away from home for so long. And I always had this theory that really fussy newborns are homesick. This is a hard place to be when you've been with God. And they haven't lost that memory of being with God yet. And, we spend the rest of our lives trying to remember it. But that little baby is still so close to that state. And I'm like, well, that's why I remember my one granddaughter was so fussy. And I remember holding her and saying, that's why you're so fussy, love. You miss heaven. I understand. It's okay. It's hard being here. There's physical discomfort and noises, and it's harsh. But of course you're weepy for home. And it really gives you some patience as a caregiver too, because you can understand that's hard on a little one. I keep telling my son, don't be, and he's not overly harsh, but I remind him, I'm like, don't be harsh with your children. The one has only had 11 years of experience on the earth. That's not much time to figure things out.
No, but it's enough time to know it's the school of hard knocks, and it's damn hard down here.
It's trial and error for everything. It's so hard. And you guys out there, you're doing a good job. I want you to know that. This is freaking hard. I mean, I have been to the other side. I know this all works out, and it's freaking hard still. I'm like, I thought it would be easier, and it's not. So buck up. I mean, if you wake up alive every day, that's a huge accomplishment. I mean, because there are forces out there trying to freaking kill you. You're doing great. You made it through the day alive. That is a huge accomplishment, especially in these days.
I think everyone needs to go off and draw themselves a nice gold A and wrap it in white
Mhm.
and then stick it on their shirt and go, I'm an A grade student.
That's right. That's a little
I'm
star
an A
on your
grade with
forehead.
God. Yes.
Have your cookies and milk at breakfast, my friends. You're beating
Yeah.
the world.
Chocolate, everything.
Live it up.
Penny, it's been a delight to have you. Thank you so much for coming in from downtown Kentucky.
Yeah.
By the way, why is it called the bluegrass state?
Because there is a type of grass seed that's called bluegrass, and the grass has a bluish green tinge to it.
Oh, just too logical.
I know,
Way
right?
too logical.
You were hoping it was something magical, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
When you said that earlier, I'm like, man, I should make up something really good. And then I thought, no, if you lie to all those people, it's they're going to doubt you and other things.
No, then you'll get a little tap on the shoulder.
I'm such a storyteller with the grandkids. I make it, my grandson was like, hold on, which arm can you see? What is this, Grandma? And I said, oh, sweetheart, I didn't think you'd notice that so young. He's just 6. And I think he was 5 at the time. And I said, that's the extra skin that hides Grandma's bat wings. And he said, what? And I said, well, at night when you're sleeping, I fly out the window with my bat wings. And where bad guys are doing bad things, I knock them down. I don't hurt them. I knock them down and I just pin them down with my wing until the police come. And so he immediately grabs his arm and I'm like, oh my goodness, you have the extra skin too. And so now my grandson thinks that we're both some version of Batman. And
that's perfectly fine. You could be any version of anything.
Right. I love magical thinking.
Oh, Penny, my deepest love to you and your dear brother, and know that Grayson is held in the arms of God now.
Yes.
And again, my thanks, and on behalf of the audience, thank you very much for joining us. I know that our screen will be shown around all over and shared, and we hope to see you back again with us and share some more wonderful stories.
Yes, I'd love to come. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Tremendous. You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And on behalf of you, I'll say farewell for now.